Hello, I'm Simon from CramTheExam.com and welcome to another walkthrough video where I take you through another CAE advanced question explaining what the answers are and why the answers are the answers. In this video I'm going to be looking at a Part 7 CAE reading or a Matura advanced question which you can find on the excellent website engexam.info. There is a multitude of resources for you to use to help you get ready for your CAE and IELTS exam if you're doing an IELTS exam at some point in the future. Remember this website. The links to this exercise and to the website are in the video description below, so make sure to not only do this exercise but to check out the website as well. Okay, a few words about the Part 7. You've got to, well, you know the score, you know what to do. I'm not going to go through that in any great detail, just a few usual tips and hints. First of all, about 17 minutes. If you can do it in 17 minutes, fantastic. If you can do it in 14 or 15 minutes, even better. You're looking for vocabulary links or contextual links. So you're either looking for word connections or you're looking for a flow to the story to choose the correct answer. And as I'll be going through the answers, I'll be explaining what those vocabulary links or those contextual links are. Okay, so let's get started. Quite an interesting story. I don't know, I quite like these stories, particularly when I read things that I wouldn't normally read, and certainly I'm not interested in travelling by ship. I'm certainly not interested in travelling in these conditions. So this is quite an adventure story for me, and I found it quite enjoyable to read, which always makes doing the exam question a little bit better. Okay, so the wind-lashed workers who battle the Atlantic in the winter. So the opening paragraph tells you about the person who's going to be doing this and when they arrive at the ship. Now, first things first. We don't have gendered nouns in English like you do in other languages, for example, French, German, Polish, and probably many others as well. However, we do have a tendency to refer to some things in a gendered way, and this depends on the person, and this can depend on the sex of the person who's speaking. So generally men call equipment or forms of transport she. Women, on the other hand, might call things him or him, not her, but him. So in this opening paragraph, we've got this word here, her. I joined the Maersk Pembroke, a container freighter, on her regular run from Europe to Montreal later on. She looked so dreadful when I found her in Antwerp. I hoped I had the wrong ship. So when you see her, she, etc., a couple of assumptions we can make. One, we're not talking about a person, we're talking about equipment, particularly given this context, and that it's probably a man who's writing this. And it's also a big clue to find out the answer, which is G, because for G it says, that feeling must have been obvious to the captain. She's been all over the world. So we've got that vocabulary link in G to the text that goes beforehand. Also, we've got this other more obvious link. She looked so dreadful when I found her in Antwerp that I'd hope I had the wrong ship. So the feeling of dread, and then the captain said, and then it says, that feeling must have been obvious to the captain. So this feeling of how bad she looks, well, there's a clear vocabulary and contextual link there. And then, by way of explanation as well, the captain says she was designed for the South Pacific. So here are some good vocabulary and contextual links to explain why the answer is G. Afterwards, it talks about a little bit about trade, and it goes on to describe Pembroke, not in an altogether flattering way. Pembroke is battered and rusty, reeking of diesel and fishy chemicals. She's noisy, her bridge and stairwells patrolled by whistling draughts which rise to howls at sea. Her paintwork is wretched. The Atlantic has stripped her bow back to a rusted steel snarl. This is not a pretty picture. So why is the answer C? Well, the answer is C, is because it gives you a contrast to this description. C says, but it does not take long to develop affection for a ship, even the Pembroke. Now, I was just checking out if Pembroke was mentioned earlier on. It is. So the fact that Pembroke is mentioned here is not a clue, but clearly the description of her and this contrast is a huge contextual clue. And we've got another vocabulary link here. Despite all of those deficiencies, everything that's mentioned here. So that's the reason why the answer is C. The paragraph afterwards goes on to talk about, I guess, how you travel. It says here, the tide raced us down the Schelte estuary, it spat us out into the North Sea. According to the weather satellites, the Atlantic was storms from coast to coast. And then we were behind schedule, the captain desperate for speed, and then talking about the size of waves. Now, this is important because 6-meter waves are okay. Any bigger, you have to slow down or you kill your ship, he said. Maybe we'll be lucky. And E starts off by saying, hoping so. In other words, hoping so that we'll be lucky. So the beginning of E joins directly onto this as well. Now, this isn't so much of a vocabulary link. It's more of a geographical knowledge link that we'll see this. That we're starting off, if you remember, we're starting her off in Antwerp. And we're going across the Atlantic. So if you've got a good knowledge of geography, you'll know the names for the seas and areas that you have to go past in order to get out to the Atlantic from Antwerp, and that's relevant a little bit, and that will help you, as I say, when we get to E, because we're going down the English Channel, past Dover. And then we've got the Bishopric of the Scilly Islands. In other words, we're just about to get out into the Atlantic. And the paragraph afterwards talks about North Atlantic storms, and that's geographically where we are now. So if you know your geography, then that will help you out. But the main link here is how the paragraph before E finishes and how E starts. Soon enough, we're in the midst of those fierce storms, and here we've got nice, wonderful descriptions, plenty of colour, plenty of adjectives about the type of waves, about what the storms are like, and the effects of that. In other words, you can sleep as much as you can before it becomes impossible, and then the fact that the Atlantic is throwing her about like a tin toy. So the atmosphere is set that we're in the Atlantic, we're in a huge storm. F continues that narrative. Huge black monsters marched out at us from the northwest, striped with the white streaks of foam running out of the wind's mouth. And we've got talk of colour, white streaks, liquid emerald. This follows on from the description in the paragraph beforehand. So this context continues into the answer, which is F. Also, with F, it says, the ocean moved in all directions at once and the waves became enormous. So we're talking about waves. And then in the paragraph afterwards, it says, when they hit us squarely. So when they, in that case, are the waves. So here we've got another vocabulary link. This paragraph then talks about what happened on the boat, different jobs that are going on, what the writer was involved in. And then it goes on to say that the weather gets worse. In other words, the wind thickened with sleet, then the snow, and then snow as the next storm arrived. The answer for the gap is B, but why? Well, it's because B says going out on deck in such conditions tempted death. So such conditions refers back to the end of this paragraph. Now, if I scroll up a little bit here, the end of this paragraph is, but the swells threw her about like a tin toy. And indeed, you've got this whole description of the Atlantic storm, as I said. And you might think that B is the answer here. But then if you get to B, it says at the end of B that the things that they were carried were still frozen in their refrigerated containers. And then the next paragraph starts off, when they hit us squarely, the whole ship reared. The context is strange. The context doesn't fit here. So that's why B is not the answer here. But B is the answer for 45 because it talks about the containers that they were carrying and the fact that the electrician went out to check that everything was okay. And then this paragraph starts with, all was well in that regard. In other words, the regard being that the containers were still working, that everything was still protected. So we've got links to the beginning of B, and then we've got links at the end of B to what follows. For 46, the answer is D. Why is the answer D? Well, let's scroll down to D and find out. In the paragraph before, we arrive at Quebec. We've travelled across the Atlantic. We're now at the other side. We're in Canada, and huge trucks came for our containers. And indeed, it describes what was in those containers. Dutch bulb, seaweed fertilizer, Iranian dates, Sri Lankan tea bags, Polish glue, etc., etc. So here we've got a contextual link to explain why D is the answer. Afterwards it says, but without them and their combined defiance of the elements, there could be nothing like what we call life at all. The question is, what is them and what is there? Well, this refers to the sailors are not told what they carry, they just keep the ships going. So there we got a clear vocabulary and contextual link to the text that follows. And indeed, we've got a synonym here. Seafarers are not sentimental, but some are quite romantic. So seafarers is a synonym to sailors. And there we go. That's why I think the answers are the answers. But if you would like to check out what this website thinks, if you scroll down to the bottom and you click on link number 9, then you will find what the website thinks is the answer for all of those things, for all of those questions. I haven't checked the answers. Hopefully the explanations the website gives are the same explanations that I give, but if you disagree or have any comments at all about anything that I've said on this video, then please leave a comment in the comment section below and I will get back to you and I'll go through that, and I love having that discussion with you guys. Okay, that's it for today. I'll be back soon with another video, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel or like me on my Facebook page so you don't miss out on another video, and I'll see you again soon.